Hey, for once, no spoilers worth talking about. At the very worst, only some minor spoilers, so proceed with caution, but I'll be avoiding any hefty spoilers in this video so we can all get involved in some name guessing. This is a bittersweet moment for me because we're all in uncharted territory now. On one hand, I love that. We're all in the same sea of uncertainty together. True, some of us still know what happens in the original, but also true is that Square have been doing a smashing job at keeping us all guessing throughout Remake and Rebirth so far. On the other hand though, the playing field is mostly equalised and I'm forced to rely on my own powers of deduction to put me ahead of the pack. What could possibly go wrong?
Possibly go wrong. That's the first thing that's ever gone wrong.
So let's take this time in the calm before the storm to reflect. We'll have a look back at the names so far in the trilogy, analyse the core of where they came from, and see if we can use those same principles to guess what's going to be revealed soon. And I'm going to force you to listen to my personal account of the time leading up to Remake and how it relates to one of the most stressful moments of my life. I really hope you enjoy. "2005. That is a mighty 20 years ago. It's been 2 full decades since the PlayStation 3 tech demo of Final Fantasy VII's intro dropped. I remember watching that and really not understanding what a tech demo was. 20 years later, I know it was a glorified target render, a tease to the audience about the power of the upcoming PlayStation 3, man. Upcoming PlayStation 3. That makes me feel so old. And absolutely not any sort of announcement. But for 17-year-old me, this was the starting gun. I was adamant that there was going to be a remake from that moment and I never wavered. It's easy to look back now and say I was right, but for an entire decade, I wasn't. I had zero clue what was going on behind the scenes, and it took until 2015 to see that grim, atmosphere-dripping trailer of a bustling Midgar. Cloud and Barrett shouldering their way through a busy crowd, and a world set alight with the promise of a new adventure. Old friends brought back to life, places we grew up in brought into the 21st century, and old wounds destined to be torn open again. When the words Final Fantasy VII Remake flashed up on the screen, the entire world sat up and took notice. Something special was about to change the RPG genre. Again. At the start, we all assumed that Remake was it. They were remaking Final Fantasy VII, and this game was the entire game. Honestly, I didn't really follow it too closely. I'm not usually a fan of remakes in general. Maybe this was my way of insulating myself from any pain I might feel from corporate gaming overlords potentially ruining a nostalgic and defining part of my childhood. But somewhere along the hype cycle, I found out that Remake was only the Midgar section of the game, and I was equal parts excited and terrified by that. And then the world threw a strange curveball my way. June 2019. Use the timestamps to skip this bit if you like, because this part is all about me and my Final Fantasy VII experience, but you might find it quite interesting. I got married to my soulmate in 2019. We had a beautiful time on our honeymoon in the Austrian Alps that June, celebrated both of our birthdays throughout July and August, and enjoyed our first Halloween and Christmas as a married couple in our own place. Complete bliss. In January, weird accounts of a new virus started popping up on the radio and in the news. They all sounded like overblown fear-mongering at the time, but the news stories only seemed to get louder and more frequent. Our Austrian honeymoon was a gift from my parents, but we had also booked a trip to America for the following March, departing on the 3rd and arriving home on the 17th. And if you know your history, you can see that we were sailing straight into disaster. I remember waking up some day in late February to a news story discussing if the virus would come to Ireland or not. And then my next memory was 4 days before we went away, when Ireland contracted its first case. Extremely long and dramatic story, somewhat short. We enjoyed a blissful 8 of our 14-day honeymoon in theme parks and sightseeing around America before I started getting panic texts from my parents and friends saying things were getting bad at home. And while I was enjoying a beer with my wife between roller coasters, we got a phone call from our travel agent. "You have to come home. Tomorrow. Here's your flight details. All borders are closing. You have to come home now." What ensued was the most surreal 24 hours of my life. My wife and I were extremely upset, but personally, I thrive in chaotic situations. I made a plan that involved us going back to our hotel, taking the money we'd budgeted for the rest of the honeymoon that we weren't going to get to use, going to the nearest Walmart and spending it on all the American snacks, food and drinks we couldn't get at home. If the world wasn't allowing us to stay on a honeymoon, you better believe I'm bringing as much of that honeymoon home as I could. So, several litres of alcohol and soft drinks, boxes of cookies, bags of Cheetos and various foods later, we had our cases packed and were ready to brave the trip home. There's plenty more details than that, but let's continue on to speculate about Part 3's name. If my disaster movie style honeymoon interests you, we can talk about that at a later stage. What's important is that we both made it home safely. and I have an insane story to tell for the rest of my life. We both work in what are deemed non-essential jobs, so our honeymoon continued after we got home. So, right about now you're probably asking why any of that matters. Well, what happened about a month into the first lockdown? Final Fantasy VII Remake. It could not have been timed better for me personally. I had all day every day to immerse myself in it and play away. I'll never forget sitting down for that first trip back into Midgar on the PlayStation 4. Right from the intro, when you hear Sephiroth's motif play before the bombing raid, you knew this wasn't just a remake, or at least I felt like it wasn't. This wasn't a beat for beat regurgitation of the PS1 classic. This was more. This was something new. Sephiroth was barely even mentioned in Midgar in the original, so returning fans knew right from the start that we were in for a treat based on this intro alone. Throughout the game, it's reinforced to us that we are remaking our fate. There is no destiny that can't be defied. We can fight on past the rules and break the chains of what once bound us. The promise dragged new fans onwards in anticipation of what might come, and returning fans onwards with the tantalising promise that what once was might not always be. Other than the whispers, the game largely plays out like it did in the original, with some expanded world building in the form of new characters and padded out sections. What was previously a 5 to 10 hour section, depending on your dilly-dally levels, is now an 80 to 100 hour game, culminating in a final chapter that flipped the script on returning fans. The Whispers promised us that we could defy destiny, that the future wasn't written, promised us change. We could remake our destiny into something new. So we fought the Whispers, destroyed the Harbingers, faced Sephiroth himself, and faced a new and uncertain destiny. The wait would be 4 long years for the next part, but holy lord, it would be worth it. Our own world went through a lot in the 2 years after that, and even though Final Fantasy VII was already a cornerstone of my childhood, it managed to come around again at the perfect time to make even more core memories for me as an adult. Right as the world was in flux and we were all distracted by these unprecedented times, Final Fantasy VII was there to be part of the journey. It would be a long wait, but in June 2022, one summer's day, a reveal trailer dropped out of nowhere, and the new title, Rebirth. It was around this point that it dawned on me that Remake wasn't just referencing the fact that Part 1 was a remake. I'd toyed with the idea before that, but it all hit me at the same moment like some sort of detective movie montage that Remake was tied into every facet of the first part. We remade connections with all places and people, visited a remade and modernised world from the original PS1. The game even centres around the idea that Destiny itself can be remade. It was a game that used the word remake as its whole design philosophy from the ground up, meaning that everything from the game being a literal remake, the core points of the narrative itself used the idea of being remade as a driving factor. And this thread continued on into Rebirth. The game was laden with imagery of birth and death. Characters go through arcs that are easily interpreted as rebirth cycles for them. Older enemies are reborn, and the word rebirth itself, just like Remake did before, is the central design philosophy of the entire game. The process of basing the game around the core philosophy became clearer and clearer to us as they developed 7's world to be deeper and more complex than it ever was before. The keen-eyed and eared among you will already see what I'm getting at here, and it's kind of become my MO, but we've taken a look back at the design philosophy of Remake and Rebirth and established a clear process of how the worlds are designed and where they came up with the titles from. Using that same philosophy, let's look forward to Part 3 and apply those rules to it. So here we get to the juicy part. I'm going to give you my 3 front runners for what I think the subtitle for Part 3 is going to be, and we'll get some discourse going in the comments about what you think it might be and why I'm wrong, as the internet does. I'll start with the one that I think makes a lot of sense, but is the one that I think is the least likely.
It's upon us. The
reunion. Narratively, avoiding spoilers, we all know exactly why this would be so apt. The reunion as an event hasn't even happened yet in the new trilogy, and if things play out in a remotely similar fashion to the original, we can assume it'll happen pretty early on in Part 3 and set the stage for the rest of the game. It's a watershed moment in Final Fantasy VII and changes the entire game's world when it happens. Unfortunately, Square made an odd choice by releasing a Crisis Core remaster and calling it Reunion, right between Remake and Rebirth. For this boring, real-world reason, I have a feeling they won't touch Reunion as a name, but to be clear, I do think it would make a great name for Part 3. Final Fantasy VII Reunion, what could have been, reuniting fates, the reunion itself, reuniting Cloud's mental state through his own identity struggles. It's thematically super strong, but real-world business silliness makes it pretty unlikely. Second up, my own personal favourite that I don't hear talked about an awful lot. Restore. In the reactor bombing mission in the original, Cloud picks up a restore material right before he sets up the bomb that you can't miss, like you are literally not allowed to miss it. And curiously, it doesn't really look that green. It actually looks quite white compared to the usual green material. Now, do I think that means Square have been cooking up a cover-up since 1997 that will come to fruition 30 years later? No. But do I really hope on some level that they are? Absolutely. I'm in no way saying that I think it's likely, but when I thought about it more, it felt like Restore would be extremely apt. There's so much talk of restoring timelines, Restore was the name of the cure materia in the original game, so it was healing magic, restoring identities, restoring balance to worlds or timelines that Sephiroth has corrupted. It's hard to disagree that it will fit, and taking into consideration the colour scheme of the first two, it's pretty likely that the subtitle of Part 3 is going to be green, because Remake and Rebirth are blue and red respectively, so green being the third colour in computing terms that makes up white for the white materia would be easily justifiable. They could always go for purple theme to fit with Genova's themes more closely, or yellow to match the 3 Whisper bosses from the end of Remake, but I have a feeling they're going to make the presentation of this game more hopeful. The content will be absolutely filled to the brim with hopelessness, but bright colours and positivity are more attractive to prospective customers. Us returning fans are here for the heartache no matter what colour's on the box. And finally, we come to the name that I think is most likely. In the cycle of birth, death and rebirth, we've already covered birth and rebirth with Remake and Rebirth, so that leaves us with death. And what better word in the Final Fantasy VII world to represent death than
returned to their planet.
Return to the planet.
Returned to the planet.
You know, if you think about it, life and death are just two sides of the same coin. Our bodies may disappear when we die, but our spirits still live on. We return to the planet, rejoin the life stream, and in time give rise to new life.
return. All life must return to the planet. It's the end of the cycle. We're born, we grow old, we die, and our bodies wither and return to the planet. Everything in Final Fantasy VII's world ends with returning. Narratively, it makes a whole lot of sense. Cloud returning to his own identity, Aerith truly returning to the planet because as it stands, Cloud still doesn't believe she has. Returning the status quo of the world, both spiritually and physically, it's not death, it's a true homecoming. We're returning to the planet, returning home. And I firmly believe after spending a weird amount of time googling two-syllable words that start with re that this is the front runner of a choice. A word that's thematically significant, a word that's narratively significant, a word that fits with the established theologies of the world and will be woven into every design choice throughout the game's development and will be significant at every level. Not only that, but I think Return represents what we initially thought Remake did. A true return of Final Fantasy VII. The overworld and its locations, all in a true open world style, the highway to travel between them, the revelation that all the smoke and mirrors were hiding the fact that the story hasn't changed at all from the original, and a return to the innovation that made the original so beloved across the world. A full circle to complete our cycle of birth, death and rebirth. A return to sanity for Cloud, and with that return, a confrontation with heavy truths. Truths about his identity, about his failings, and about his past. Truths that he's going to have to wrestle with if he has any chance of saving himself, his friends, and the entire planet. Okay, so I want to see some serious conversation in the comments about what this game is going to be called. It's selfish, but I want to be able to point back to this video and say, ha! Me and my guys predicted that. So fire away in the comments and we'll figure this out together. And while I'm at it, I might as well ask you to hit that subscribe button. Hit me with all your ideas no matter how out there they are, because as I see it, we only have a few weeks before we find out for sure. I really reckon the Game Awards might be the moment we see a title reveal. I appreciate every view, and if you've stuck with me this far in the video, I genuinely appreciate you more than you'll ever know. This channel is nothing without the viewers, so thanks so much for participating. Stick around and I'll see you in the next one.